I had to learn a new language when I moved to North Carolina almost 30 years ago. There's the obvious, y'all and all y'all. But there's the less obvious as well. For I had never known that you could do something. And it took me a while to realize what I was hearing, to realize that the phrase, "I do appreciate it," can become one word, depreciate it. Yet the one that really caught me off guard was cut, as in cut off the light, which in some sense makes sense, right? Cut the current to the light and cut it off. But it's also used for cut on. And I'm thinking to myself, this doesn't make sense. The truth is that it can often be hard to find the right words and to express ourselves, especially when it comes to what we're feeling, and especially in the midst of loss, of death, and of trauma, whatever it might be. Just the other day, someone in my family lost a young friend in a tragedy. And they said, "I just don't know what to say." You know what that's like. I just don't know what to say. I think Easter is one of those events. It's so fascinating to me that the gospel writers don't try to hide the trauma of Easter. They don't try to hide the smell of the resurrection. You might think it would be an embarrassment, right? I mean, you might think they might try to downplay it all. After all, their friend seems to have failed. This guy who claimed he was going to save them, who was seemingly defeated and murdered in the most gruesome way. Yet, Mark tells it just like it happened, it seems. This is one of the clues to me that we can trust the story. For if you're trying to paint the best story in the best light, you just wouldn't write it this way. You'd at least take out all these smelly parts, right? But what Mark tells us is that when the Sabbath was over in the darkness early that morning, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome brought spices to anoint Jesus' dead body. The reader is, I think, to hear here that you know what happens with a body in high temperatures, as it were in this part of the world. It becomes putrid in a very short time. This wasn't Egypt with elaborate mummification practices. This is Judaism. And in truth, as it was then, is true today for a whole branch of Judaism. When I was working many years ago at Bellevue Hospital in New York City, the public hospital of all of New York City, I was on a number of occasions present when a Jewish patient died on the operating table. And all they would do is wrap it up right then and there. They wouldn't even take out whatever tubes or IVs were in the body. They just cut it all the way around, all the tubes, and wrap them all up in the body, honoring the belief, the Jewish belief, that when the Messiah comes, he can only put you back together and raise you up if he's got everything to work with. So the women come early in the morning with this in their consciousness to wrap the body of Jesus with the sweet-smelling spices. Of course, it doesn't totally cover it up. The smell still seeps through. But they wanted to do what they could. And in the face of death, all of our gestures seem futile, don't they? I mean, we don't know what to say. So we bring a casserole. Maybe we send flowers. Maybe we write a card or send a card, but that means we have to find one that says anything truly meaningful. I think it was the same on that first Easter. The women arrived at the tomb, and as Mark tells us, they had very few words. All they said was, "Who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance to the tomb?" That's all they said. In the whole story, that's all they said. And yet here we are. Yet Mark does record their feelings. Do you know how hard it is to get human beings to say what they're feeling? Ask any good psychologist and a priest, really. I have this piece of paper in my office that's a feeling wheel, so you can kind of try to figure out what you're feeling, especially in the time of loss, in the time of grief. But today, in this gospel, we get more feeling than any of the other gospels. When the women saw the stone had already been rolled away, and the young man, an angel, by the side, Mark says they were alarmed. Then they were told the good news. He has been raised. He's not here. Look at the tomb, it's empty. Go and tell the disciples, and you will see Jesus there. Then Mark tells us that the women fled the cemetery in terror and amazement. Terror and amazement. Don't we know what it's like at the time of loss, in the time of grief, to have more than one feeling at the same time? Don't we know what that's like? Don't we know we have the feelings, but maybe not the words to go with them? And then Mark says, contrary to what they have been told, they left and told nobody anything because they were afraid. And many of the manuscripts, early manuscripts of Mark, suggest that that's the last word of the whole gospel. Afraid. The women's experience and emotions is like a soup, and it leaves them speechless. Life-changing events often have few words to describe them, don't they? Their friend and leader has been executed, and yet he has now been raised from the dead. It's incredible. It's unbelievable. It's joy, amazement, and it's scary. It's terrifying, perhaps, because they know that the joy that they feel inside, and not only hearing this good news, but they actually saw it. They saw that empty tomb. They know that this good news will likely not be welcomed by the powerful people who put him to death. And It may not even be welcomed by the disciples who turned their back on him just before he was nailed to the cross. No wonder they fled and told nobody about the joy in their heart. The women know that no one had ever been raised from the dead like this before. They know that God has acted in a way that has never happened before. The women teach us that Easter hope and Easter joy is like a new language, one they have never spoken before, and one that will take time to learn. And don't we know what this is like? When loss and death and sin, even those things we have done and left undone, look us right in the face. It's like a new language that we don't have words for. The women know that he is risen will change everything and everyone. They know that the power of God to make things new is going to challenge the whole world around them. I don't know if you have felt like you don't have the words in times of loss and death and grief and trauma and things done and things left undone. Truth be told, I often don't have the words. I'm glad I'm Episcopalian so I can open the Book of Common Prayer. And it can lead me and guide me to hope. After almost 30 years of preaching on Easter, maybe I've gained just enough humility to let you all in on a little secret. The clergy usually look at each other a week or two before Easter and say, "What are you going to say about it this year?" Maybe in the face of both death and resurrection, maybe in the face of this incredible news that though it seems like death is winning, God will never let death have the last word. Maybe in the face of this incredible, unbelievable news, all we can say is he is risen. Alleluia. Alleluia. Amen.